G'day, it's Heath here from pickinglessons.com. This is part 2 in the series on learning the neck with triads. In part 1, we had a look at strings 1, 2 and 3 triads, like this D shape that we all know, and how we can move these triads around in the same chord form and we end up with a different chord. For example, there's a G and there's an A. And we started to build off that and look at the other major triads that we find on those strings. In this lesson, we're going to expand on that and move into strings 2, 3, and 4, have a look at the intervals we find in the triads, really make sure we know where the root note is, have a look at how we connect each position. So when we have, for example, this D, we then have this particular D triad as well on the next set of strings. We'll also have a look at the minor third interval, the blue note that we can find amongst those notes in the triad. Plus, we're going to have a look at a box pattern around our chords. So for example, here, there's a D extension, and here's a D pentatonic scale, all in that one position. And we can do that all around the neck. So we're going to have a look at that in this lesson. And of course, we've got this example solo that really features all this information we're learning. So we'll check that out as well. Now, if you head to pickinglessons.com, you will be able to get all this stuff in the member section there. But we're going to start out here in this video right now, having a look at the first triad extension. We're going to have a look at this D shape and this one down here. So our D triad that we all know, it's just a regular D chord. But when we just play the 3 notes, there's the triad. When we move this triad around, a little reminder from the first part of this lesson, we moved that D chord and our root note there, our third finger, is the D. So when we shift this one across, for example, 2 frets, there would be an E. If we keep moving up the neck, what we're going to find is that our G position there, fret 8 with our third finger, there's a G triad, and if we keep going another 2, there's an A triad, there's our third finger there on the A. D, G, and A, that's our 1, 4, 5 in the key of D. That's what we're going to work on in this lesson as well. So firstly, make sure we do know the D and the G and the A positions. All of this is covered in the first part of this lesson. Here though, let's have a look at the extension we find. So when we have our D position, we can then move into this next set of strings. So string 2, 3, and 4, our notes are the same on 2 of those strings. So what we find in strings 2 and 3 is identical. All we're going to do is bring up the next note to form a new triad. And what we end up playing is this 4th, 2nd, and 3rd frets, F sharp, A, and D. That forms our D chord. So just back again for a second. We have a D triad on strings 1, 2, and 3. Our first finger can pivot, change our fingers slightly. Now we have our extension of the triad taking us into string 4. Top triad on strings 1, 2, and 3. Swing around into string 4 there. Then we have a secondary triad in that position. So 2 ways of playing D in triad form in that position. Now, firstly, get to know how that fits together. So when you see this triad here for the D, we can find that one really easily. We kind of visualize and can see that chord. Now, when we move this D though up to G position, we're going to have the identical thing happen. There's our G on the next set of strings. So we have our G triad on top, taking a step into the 4th string here. There's our G triad there. And then the same for A and for A. So if we have our D position, our triad on top strings, then we have the extension. With our G position and the extension, and our A position and our A extension. So we're focusing on D, G, and A. That puts us in the key of D. D, G, and A is the 1, 4, 5 major chords there in the key of D. This is going to work for any chord, any key. So you got to remember that we're linking these patterns together, but they will be able to be used in any particular key you wish, any chord position you wanted to. But if we really focus on D, G, and A to start us off, we're kind of not getting too far ahead of ourselves. So we can really just focus in on that one key, 3 chords. So that's an example of what we're going to be doing in this lesson. We're really just going to expand our knowledge of the neck through the use of the triads. We're going to break the triads down, understanding that when we have the root note, what are the other notes in the chord? We're going to look at those particular intervals we find in the chord and expand on that. Talk about a blue note that we can find really commonly against that. Works on a lot of styles of music. It was a real feature in that example solo I played at the beginning of this video. We're also going to break down those boxes around. So for example there, that D position we just worked on is going to have this particular pentatonic scale. So we can call it a box. There's that box pattern around the D chord there. And so we'll learn all about that. And in every position we have a scale pattern that goes with our chord position. So we're really going to dive into that. And then within the example solo, we do break down a lot of these ideas, but using it in a very lead-orientated way. And we'll look at some ideas that we find there, all coming from what we're learning. So pickanlessons.com, we will continue this lesson. We're going to break down the remainder triads and look at their extensions. Then we'll get into the intervals and the structure of the chord, the notes in the major triad, and then have a look at those pentatonic scale boxes and also break down the example solo. So pickanlessons.com, I'll see you there.